Hi, Chester Elton here, and welcome to the Anxiety at Work podcast. You know, when Adrian and I first started this podcast, we had an amazing interview with a guy named Chris Rainey. We've become dear friends ever since. He runs an amazing company out of London called HR Leaders. They do virtual conferences and podcasts, and he's just amazing. Well, what makes Chris even more amazing than his tremendous success in business is he suffered from anxiety most of his life, and he was our very first interview on our Anxiety at Work podcast. So we've gone back into the archives to revive this interview to share with you because it's even more relevant now than when we first recorded it. And because it was our first podcast, we're pretty sure that not many people actually listened to it. So we want to represent to you Chris Rainey and his story and his journey through anxiety and how that rippled through his company, through his family, and through his community. So I hope you'll enjoy it. And I always want to give a shout out to our sponsors that make our podcast possible. You know, our very first sponsor is Life Guides, and we're so indebted to them. They want to impact the lives of 1 billion people by creating this peer-to-peer community where people can navigate their day-to-day stressors. They provide a place of empathy, listening, and support with a guide who's walked in your shoes, somebody that you can confide in that's been where you've been. So go to lifeguides.com/schedule a demo and add the code HEALTHY2021 to the free text box to receive 2 months of free service. It's a great deal. And secondly, our sponsor, which is Go Happy. Go Happy is this wonderful communication hub. It's a Go Happy hub where you can communicate with your employees and your frontline leaders to send them notes of gratitude, logistical updates, referral opportunities. If you want to get a message through to your employees in a really fun and amazing platform, Go Happy Hub is the place to go. And again, if you say Chester sent you or Adrian sent you, you'll get 2 months of free service. And so here now is our interview with Chris Rainey. Enjoy. Welcome to the Anxiety at Work podcast. I'm Chester Elton, and this is my co-author and dear friend, Adrian Gostick.
We hope the time you're going to spend with us is going to help remove the stigma of anxiety and mental health in the workplace and in your life. And with experts from around the globe, we want to provide ideas and tools to deal with anxiety in your world.
Our guest today is the amazing Chris Rainey. Chris is the host of the #1 HR podcast in the world, HR Leaders. It can be found everywhere you think of when you think of your podcast. His company hosts the most amazing virtual conferences dealing with the most important issues of our times, particularly at work. And Adrian and I have both been privileged to be interviewed by Chris and be in his virtual gatherings. It's also interesting when you try to Google Chris's bio because all you get is podcasts and his conferences. I finally did find one paragraph, and this is his bio from his LinkedIn profile, and you're going to love it. I'm a husband to an amazing wife, father to a beautiful baby girl, sports addict, podcast host, and co-founder of HR Leaders, a cross-industry learning community powered by the world's most influential HR practitioners. So we are delighted to welcome you to our humble little podcast, Chris. Thanks for making the time for us.
It's great to be here. It's great to be here. I think it's the first podcast I've been on. 300 episodes of our own podcast. I've never been a guest, so this is a new experience for me being on the other side of the microphone.
Oh, that's great. And Chris is an amazing podcast host and really brings out the best in his guests. So tell us a little bit about you. We gave you a little background there, but tell us what you'd like everybody to know about you, Chris.
Interesting. I'm so used to asking everyone else this question. So yeah, you kind of mentioned a lot of it. You know, a husband to a beautiful wife, got a 2-year-old baby daughter now. I never, like most people in this world of HR, I never planned on doing this for a living. I grew up playing ice hockey and I was a professional break dancer. So that was my background. And I was like, ice hockey is not big in the UK, so I couldn't kind of pursue that one. I did a tour around the world with various music artists as a break dancer, so that was definitely fun. And somehow my part-time job in sales, selling products to human resources executives, has become a 14-year obsession. And I think it was really exciting, to speak with HR professionals who are at the center of every organization and interweaved into every facet of the business. And that was for me just amazing, to have those conversations every day and learn about the cultures, the leadership styles, and the products and the customers. And it was just super fascinating. And that led to us kind of building the largest conference for HR executives in Europe, which was super fun, which is how I met yourself,
Yeah.
Chester, along the way when you were on stage throwing toy carrots at everyone, which I thought was definitely interesting at the time. And then it kind of got to the point where I really wanted to create a platform where I could share the incredible work these leaders are doing with the rest of the world. And then that led to the HR Leaders podcast as well. So the rest is history.
It really is amazing. You talk about virtual conferences. I mean, the last one I was on, you had like 10,000 people show up. Most virtual conferences, they're lucky if they get a couple of hundred. So you've really cracked the code. The part of your story that's really interesting to Adrian and I is, we wrote our book, Anxiety at Work, and we featured you in the book because when people meet you, you're this engaging, happy guy, incredible salesperson. And yet you really struggled with anxiety for a long time. In fact, you were a master at hiding it, right? You didn't even tell your wife. So tell us about that and why you didn't feel safe sharing this anxiety at work or at home.
Well, before work, it kind of starts at home, right? And it filters into work. They're one in the same. We talk about anxiety at work, but that's directly linked to your life in every area. So it started as a kid. So as a kid, I kind of suffered I had a really difficult upbringing, drugs, alcohol, violence, domestic violence in the household. And that just kind of was a recipe for disaster in terms of anxiety. And that stuck with me, and I never really knew how to process those emotions of seeing what I saw and kind of being in that environment. And then that led into school. And it it was something I just kept to myself. So I was having these anxiety attacks and I didn't know what they was, right? So as a kid, you're like, what is this? What is happening to me right now? And I'd seen my mum have panic attacks and she would never tell anyone. So I kind of just modeled that, as in, this is something you don't tell people about. This is something that is not, you should be ashamed of, but this is what I was learned. So it's kind of learned behavior of seeing it modeled in my mum. Obviously, she didn't know at the time the impact it was having on me, of course. She was going through her own challenges and difficulties. So it was just something that I always thought, you just don't talk to people about this. And it also made me feel like that I was the only one, because I didn't know anyone else that was going through this. So you kind of assume that you're like a weirdo in that sense. And then again, as I said, this came through college and then into the workplace. So I was in a very high pressure sales environment, which is definitely not a good environment if you want to be in, if you already suffer from anxiety as well. And even with my relationship with my wife, there was days where I didn't want to leave the house. I felt like I was, having a heart attack and didn't know why. And I didn't want to tell her because I was so worried about, what are my friends, family going to think of me? They're going to think that I'm weak, or that there's something wrong with me, or that, there's this sort of stigma attached to mental health, especially with men as well, males, that they don't really want to talk about it. I'll stop there if you want to jump in. But so I feel like it's just the fear of kind of what people are going to think of you, and that they're going to think a little less of you. And again, I've always seen it modeled in my family where you just don't talk about these things.
So at some point though, you were actually on a podcast when you decided to sort of come clean, if you will, about what you were feeling.
Yeah. I was doing, obviously in the world of work, big focus and challenge in organizations is mental health and well-being for their employees, right? So I made it is kind of like, I felt like a bit of a hypocrite that I was doing these podcasts around mental health and well-being and having these leaders share their own stories. And I was on a show with a friend, Tim Munden, who's the Chief Learning Officer of Unilever, and also the CEO of an incredible charity here in the UK called Mind, who work with loads of companies around mental health and well-being, Paul Farmer. And they were both just sharing their own, journeys and anxiety, and, Tim talking about his PTSD, and they were so vulnerable. And I could see how empowered they were by that vulnerability and the impact, more importantly, that it was having on their employees and everyone else. And I was sitting there asking these questions, and I just felt like it felt like the right moment, felt like a safe place. In fact, the fact that they weren't my close friends and family, it almost made it easier to share it. And I was like, if there's ever a time, now is the time. Although I'm live on the podcast on LinkedIn, probably isn't the best time, but I did it, and it was scary. But I can tell you, it's the best thing I've ever done. And immediately, it felt like this massive weight was lifted off my shoulders because I was no longer going through this on my own, and I've been battling it on my own since I can ever remember. But now, all of a sudden, everyone knows it's out the bag, and since then it's just been a very humbling experience. And I can tell you that all of those fears of what people would think and all of the negative thoughts I had were all unfounded, and actually everyone around me has kind of rallied to support me. And I feel like actually it's one of my biggest strengths now as a leader is that vulnerability and understanding that I'm not perfect. And we're all going to go through these challenges together. And in fact, since then I haven't actually had an anxiety attack.
Wow.
I've been close, but there's all now. Before I was all alone. Now I could pick up the phone to my co-founder Shane or someone in my team or my wife and say, "Look, I'm feeling this way. Can you just speak to me because I'm feeling really anxious right now?" Before I didn't have that outlet. It was just suffer in silence, which so many millions of people do all around the world.
Yeah, that's incredible. You didn't share that part of the story with me before. That since then you've come close, but haven't had a panic attack. The one thing you shared with me that I thought was really interesting is you're live on this podcast and your employees are listening and they had no clue that you were struggling with this. So how did you deal with that afterwards? You said people rallied and now your employees go, wow, the boss is struggling with this. So talk us through that, because I think a lot of leaders are afraid, what will my employees think? What will my coworkers think when they hear it?
Well, the interesting thing is they were in the room. So they're literally like 3 meters away from me, and they're hearing this live. Not only are they hearing it on the podcast, but they're actually in the room with me. And I wouldn't say they completely didn't know, because there was times where I just wouldn't turn up and I wouldn't be in for a few days and I'd be like, I just need some time. But I would be very vague about it, right? It would never be like, because of this. So it's always like very vague. So they knew something was up, and they didn't know exactly why or what I was feeling, but they knew that, which is also more concerning, because then it kind of leads to uncertainty of more questions, which is actually the opposite. But they were amazing. They were like I can't remember exactly what they said, but I just remember everyone being super supportive and saying, and some of them being like, I feel the same way, or a lot of them were like, I felt the same way certain periods, and you realize that you're not the only one suffering, and some of them thanked me. Some of them spoke to me about how some of their family members, whether it was their girlfriends or wives or family, were suffering and how that was impacting them, because also it impacts you. It impacts my wife as well, right? My anxiety impacts my family and everyone around me. And it opened up a different type of conversation. And I felt like I bonded with them, even though I've known some of them for like 10, 15 years. I felt like we bonded on a very different level than we had before. So yeah, it was good. It was a very pleasant experience. And I'm not saying to everyone it'll always be that case, because that's a bit misleading. There will be some people that don't get it and don't understand. But I think, as I said, just being able to have that point where you don't have to, the weight's no longer on your shoulders. You can actually talk to people about it, like that alone. Because I told you when we first spoke, my biggest thing, I realized I was anxious about being anxious. So there's this vicious circle of, I'm feeling anxious, I can't tell anyone, which makes me feel even more anxious. And then it feeds back into that loop. And that, for me, I realized was probably the worst thing I could have done, is that I was all alone. Whereas now I can just speak to people and be like, look, I'm feeling this way. There are days I don't want to get out of bed. And that's okay. And I just want to let you know that. And I just need to, to recharge. And it's like, no problem. But it also means that when they feel that way, they can come to me too.
Well, what I thought was really powerful is you talked, Chris, was to us earlier. You told us about, that your wife, you didn't tell her that, there'd be social situations that would make you very anxious, that you would say, I'm not feeling well, or
a lot of trouble for that. Yeah. No, right. There was times I didn't want to turn up to the weddings, or didn't want to turn up to her friend's gathering. And I would make these excuses where basically, I would lie. I would lie. And she knew I'd be lying, and she'd be like, get really frustrated. Like, why are you, this is not obviously the reason, right? And my friends would always make comments about it, like, "Oh, Chris is really annoying. You're always the first person to leave the party." And I wouldn't say to them, "Oh, I want to go because I'm feeling really anxious right now," because I'd feel like that's embarrassing. They wouldn't understand. But now they know. They're like, "Oh, it makes so much sense." I was like, "Yeah, it's not that I didn't want to be there. I did want to be there, but I felt anxious." And even there was a point where my friends, my wife's family would say things like, "Chris doesn't care. He doesn't want to come. He doesn't make an effort to turn up to family gatherings and stuff like that," which really hurt me, because it wasn't really the case. I just didn't feel like I could cope. So now when if there's a situation where I don't want to go, I'll rather than lie, I'll just say, like, I'm not feeling up for it. I'll make sure and they're like, cool. So it's just, and then again, it's like I would get really anxious about even telling my wife that, because I didn't want to disappoint her before, right? Because I'd have to make up this new lie, which, what does that do? Makes you even more anxious. So again, it's this like vicious circle that you keep going into. Whereas it just makes it so much easier, where you can just say, like, I'm just not feeling well. Not feeling up to it today.
It's so interesting, right? We have all these fears about people that we know love us and that we know that care about us, and yet we're still anxious. We still don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to be weak. And you've shared a couple of things that you do when you get close. You call a friend or you call somebody out. What are some other things you do for people that are listening that suffer from this and they're starting to get there? Where are your safe havens? What are some of the, like, do you have mantras? Do you meditate? Do you have the one go-to person? Share with us some of the things you do.
Definitely breathing is a huge part of it. So, because one of the, symptoms or things is, when you have anxiety, you have your heart rate increases, you start sweating, right? And stuff like that. So in order to counteract that, I do box breathing, which is kind of breathe in 5 seconds, hold 5 seconds, breathe out 5 seconds, and continue it. And then that kind of regulates my breathing and calms me down, my heart rate down. Because you get that because with anxiety, you get that like adrenaline dump, which makes your kind of heart go crazy. But that only ever lasts like 5-10 minutes. So knowing, because I've done research, that you can, once you get through that period, you're probably fine after that. It's that adrenaline and that heart rate increased, which what makes people feel like they're having a heart attack, and they start panicking, which is when you have a panic attack, right? Because people are like, "Oh, I can't breathe," and that's kind of how I used to feel, and that's what used to get me. I'd get that feeling, and then all of a sudden, I'll convince myself I can't breathe when no one's ever died from an anxiety attack. And if you do the research, I'm laughing about it now, but at the time you're terrified, right? But knowing that actually this will pass. And normally after 5-10 minutes, and just knowing that that's going to be the case really comforts me. And then I kind of just breathe through the 5-10 minutes using box breathing. And for me, I'd always also get fresh air. Just something about being outside and having fresh air helps me. So one of the things I do is I try to step away from the situation. So if I'm in my room, I'll just go into a different environment, whether it's just in the garden or outside, because I'm just separating where the anxiety started, if that makes sense, and then kind of trying to breathe through. So that's one thing. The other thing is I just get on the phone with someone. I don't face it alone anymore. If I start feeling that way, that's only if I try not to get to that stage anymore. I haven't been at that stage in a long while. So before I get to that stage, I just pick up the phone and just give someone a call and be like, "Look, I'm just feeling this way. Can you just chat to me about anything? Like, you could just talk about anything, just distract my mind until I can calm down." So that's kind of my, I'm coping, but no longer, I'm coping by having someone with me on my side. That's the main thing, and not being alone. So and then in terms of like longer term, which I've doing a really bad job at recently today, by the way, I saw this in my diary that I was going to be speaking to you both. And I was like, wow, like you've the last few weeks I'm going on the wrong path right now, Chester, Adrian. I've not been taking care of myself for the last few weeks. I haven't been sleeping well, I haven't been eating well, I've been exercising, and I can feel the anxiety. There was, yesterday I was supposed to meet Shane, who's is my co-founder in the office, to go through some stuff for next year. And I didn't turn up because I didn't want to get out of bed. I had one of those days where I was feeling really anxious. And I realize it's always because if I'm not eating my three things, I realize if I'm eating well, exercising and sleeping well, I normally, pretty much never have an anxiety attack. But it's a knock-on effect, right? Because if you stop exercising, you feel like, then you just start eating any food because you're like, well, I'm not exercising anyway, so now I'm just going to eat junk food. And you eat junk food and you don't exercise, and you have a terrible sleep. And again, it's this vicious circle that starts repeating. And I found that if I'm kind of ticking those three boxes, I feel great. And it kind of, so I need to tonight, I'm going to get an early night, eat some good dinner, and exercise and get back in. So those are kind of three things that always serve me well. If I feel like if I'm exercising well, eating well, sleeping well, and we can go into each of those without the why, with the exercise, the endorphins that are released to make to feel good, right? And then with, lack of sleep increases your cortisol, which makes you more anxious. There's, the science behind each of those things that I've looked into, which have a direct, or even, what you eat, right? Your gut is your second brain, right? In your body, there's more nerve endings in your stomach than there is in the rest of your body and your brain. So directly what you eat is how you're going to feel. So if you eat like crap, you're going to feel like crap, directly. And I've noticed that if I eat well, I feel well. So you're not completely helpless. I think for years, I just felt completely helpless. You can take control of it yourself, which is very empowering.
Let me come back to something you said a minute ago, Chris. You said some people won't get this. I mean, this is kind of the hard part of anxiety is that, thankfully you're dealing with HR leaders who typically are a little more enlightened about these issues. And yet there are millions of managers throughout the world who just don't get this. I mean, what's your message to them? How, if I'm an employee, if I'm dealing with a manager who maybe doesn't get it, is there anything I can do? Is there any way we can help enlighten people around us to this issue?
First and foremost, if you're a manager, you're listening right now, or a leader, you don't have to get it. I think that's the misconception. People are worried about asking their employees these questions and how they're feeling because they're worried about actually the answers. Because what if someone does actually open up to me and I don't know what to say as a manager? And I think that was my concern. I never wanted to tell my managers because I thought they're not going to understand. But to the managers, you don't need to understand. Just listen. Just listen. And that's all we need from you, someone to listen. It was funny, I was speaking to my therapist and they're saying, why is it that when you have someone on the phone, when you call people, that's actually what gets you out of this anxiety? Isn't that silly? It's quite silly, isn't it? Think about it. Right, they could be the other side of the world, but just having them on the phone and knowing someone's there with me stops me from having an anxiety attack. They're not doing anything. They're just there. So you don't have to have all the answers as a manager. Just being very authentic and open. And when you ask someone if they're okay, you truly mean it and just listen. You don't have to have the answers. And then, what was your original question? Was that an answer to the question?
I think you're getting to it. Yeah, it's exactly. It's what do you say to those who just aren't getting this, whether they're a manager, colleagues, etc.
That's okay. That's what I'd say. That's okay. I'm like, that's it. Because a lot of my friends and family I speak to is they don't want to bring up the subject because they're worried I don't know what to say. And that's okay. You don't have to have the answers. Just listen and be there for someone. And then, yes, if you're in a business, you can sign, most companies have, you can signpost them to people that can help. And most companies now have the right resources and things in place to help people. So just be open to the conversation and listen. And then, they're not going to be asking you for advice about what to do. And so I don't think I've ever called someone and said, tell me how to get over anxiety. It doesn't happen. But just knowing someone's open and if they don't get it, then that's I've never experienced that, to be honest. I've never experienced someone who hasn't been supportive. Never. Like I've talked to people like even my co-founder Shane. He said he didn't get it. Like he's like, I don't get it. Like he doesn't understand. And if you've never had an anxiety attack, then of course you're not going to get it. But it wasn't a negative way. He's like, I don't get it. Explain to me, how it feels. And I'm like, well, this is how it feels, right? But he didn't get it. No. It's hard to explain to people. But I don't think I've ever come across someone who's belittled me or kind of made me feel like less than. Never. Maybe I'm just lucky, but I've so far that's never been experienced.
Isn't that amazing though? because when you're vulnerable to people, they're much more understanding than when you just out and out lie to them, right? You say you were lying before, and yeah, it made things worse.
I'm telling you right now, for anyone listening, like, yeah, that's the worst thing you can do. And I did that for my whole life, like up until like last year. Like it's just, yeah. And you realize, and I think that's something we've seen in the pandemic, right? Is just conversations now become more to the forefront. And again, some of my closest friends have come out and said, I've been suffering. I've even found out friends of mine that have been seeing therapists for years, like some of my best friends I never knew. Those same people that I'm going out with and I'm saying I've got to leave the party, they're feeling the same way. Like, and it's like, or some of the, top business executives that I follow or entrepreneurs I'm like, that I look up to that I think, no way, right? Like I get that all the time with me. They're like, you, Chris? I'm like, yeah, like, it's a lot of it's, it's a facade almost. I don't get me wrong. When I'm on the podcast, I do feel excited and happy. I'm not feeling down or anything like that. But there are days where I just don't want to be there. I'm not superhuman. And there's the same days where, like a few days ago, my wife gave me a call crying on the phone saying she can't cope anymore because she was really struggling balancing her workload and looking after our daughter. So I had to just say to the team, like, I got to go. I need to go home and help out my wife. And so everyone's got their breaking points. Whereas probably in the past, she wouldn't have done that. She would have just powered through and not said anything, and she would have suffered in silence. Whereas she's like, my wife's almost much more open now. We have a better relationship actually, coming out of this, because we can be honest with each other and not feel like someone's going to be judged. If anything, it's actually probably the most empowering thing.
Well, you're so vulnerable right now. I mean, this has got to be so encouraging for people listening to this to hear your story. And, I've been thinking a lot lately about our inner voices. And I'm sure, we've all got an inner voice. And when you're struggling, isn't it interesting when you listen to that inner voice, how you talk to yourself? And how you would never talk to anybody else like you talk to yourself. Is that part of the anxiety loop that you keep telling yourself, oh, you're weak, you're vulnerable?
It's the hardest part.
How do you counteract that?
Yeah,
how do you change that inner voice?
Oh, that is, if I had that answer, I wish I had the answer. That is something I battle with every day in, day out. Like it's the self-doubt. It's like for me, one of my links to my anxiety is about being alone. So like if I'm around a lot of people, I never really feel anxious because I know if something happens, right, they're there. Whereas if I'm on my own somewhere, I start panicking and I'm like, well, what if I have an anxiety attack and no one's here to help me, right? So that's something I battle with. And that inner voice is really tough to get over. Like even if it's a journey, like for example, I've never ever traveled abroad on my own, ever, because I'm so scared that what if. And it's that inner voice of going, Chris, what if you jump on a plane and you're on your own and you have an anxiety attack and no one's around you to help? And it's like a constant battle. But now it's just kind of understanding that because I've done a lot of research around it, I understand that it's not real and it's just in my head. And that, again, no one's ever died from an anxiety attack. And if I get through that first 5-10 minutes when the adrenaline kind of wears off, I'm going to be okay. And kind of talking yourself through it that way. Also affirmations. I haven't done it so much recently. Again, I've been pretty bad recently, but what I also used to do is kind of fall asleep to these like YouTube playlists of positive affirmations. It's like a 5-6 hour playlist, and I'll listen to it in my sleep because, your subconscious mind stays awake, which is why, you kind of wake up in the night sometimes and think there's something going on in the house because it's part of your brain is always there. And I'll be consuming these positive affirmations like, you are, I am affirmations and, powerful affirmations. And I'd wake up feeling amazing because all night long, my brain's been programmed with just positive messages. And I'd create my own ones at some point when it was really bad. I'd create my own ones and play them back as well. And also just waking up in the morning. I think you said it like before, Chester, is kind of getting out of bed and just having those, sitting there, just taking a moment to think about what you're grateful for. And for me, that's, the health and wealth of my family, having a roof over my head and everything else. We always normally jump out of bed in the morning and think, oh, what's the challenge of the day? And what have I got in it? Then you don't want to start a day like that as well. So yeah, you are right. That's probably one of the biggest challenges is that because whatever you think is directly reflects how you feel. So if you think you feel anxious, it then manifests physically. And it's, you can literally, it's like, you can worry yourself sick, right? You hear people say that, right? And you can. I have done it. I've literally worried myself sick to the point where I'm physically get sick because I'm thinking about so much negative things as well. So that's also something I have to be very conscious of. But now I kind of catch myself out. Before, like I wasn't in control. But now I'm like, oh, Chris, you're slipping off. Get back on, come on, get back in the gym, start eating well. And then I even said to my wife and the team, if you see me wavering, just tell me, tap me on the shoulder and say, Chris, haven't been sleeping recently, you're coming to work tired, or I noticed you're not taking any breaks, or etc. So like, again, like I'm not on this journey alone. Right. Everyone's here to help each other.
This has been just so terrific, Chris. One maybe last question for you that I have is, now you're a leader yourself, and how are you leading maybe your team differently than you were led? We all try to raise that bar from maybe previous generations.
Yeah, like my generation when I came up was like, I'm your manager, you're my employee, you work for me, that's it, right? There's no relationship there. And I was led like that for years, and it felt horrible. It's like I spend most of my life, actually more time with you than I even do with some of my closest friends and family. But you're telling me I can't, have a meaningful relationship and be vulnerable and talk to you. So for now, like work and life at HR Leaders it is one in the same. There is no difference, especially now, right? Work happens at home and it's directly intertwined. So I feel like being vulnerable as a leader is been probably a game changer for me and the team, and understanding that everyone has a bad day, and if you need some time off or if you want to open up the conversation, everyone understands, and that's part of our culture now. And I feel like that's been incredible to be able to do that. And at the end of the day, if I'm going to turn up to work every day and spend time with these people, I want them to be, we always like be your whole self to work. We hear about it, but like there's a different meaning to that now, I think, at HR Leaders, of what that means. If my background, if anyone's watching, can tell you anything differently, that kind of represents our culture here of bringing yourself to work, because this is full of Star Wars memorabilia and all sorts of things there. But I want people to feel safe and have a culture where people feel like they can be vulnerable. And that's where creativity happens. That's where innovation happens. That's where engagement happens. And that's where the magic happens, when people feel safe and valued and comfortable, and that their voices are heard. Then you're going to have a pretty good time at work and a pretty good business.
Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like we've all had kind of a therapy session with you, and just listening to you talk and the calm and the struggle and everything you've done. As we kind of wrap up, we love to ask our guests, what are 3 things that you'd want people to take away from this podcast that are maybe suffering from anxiety or afraid to talk about it at work? Tell us your top 3.
Top 3. It's interesting because I only saw your questions just before we hit record. I was thinking about this. I think the first one is you're not alone. Like for me, that was probably like, I just thought I was alone all those years, and it was a dark place. So knowing that you're not alone and there's other people out there, that in itself is huge. So if you're listening right now and you don't want to talk to your friends and family, drop me an email, chris@hrleaders.com. Drop me a LinkedIn message, whatever it may be. I'm happy to have a chat with you. You're not alone. That in itself, just having someone to talk to, I feel like is half the battle, honestly. Secondly, this isn't something that, a lot of people feel like you're kind of powerless. You're not powerless. And that's something that also, so you can do it. For me, what works for me may not work for you, but for me, as I said, eating healthy, getting good sleep and exercise seems to be the solution. And I haven't, I've avoided medication and any other things like that along the way. And so try and figure out what works for you. That's try doing what I've done. If it works for you, great. If not, then I'm sure there's another ways. And then thirdly, just understand the power of your vulnerability as well. I would say it's like, because by sharing your story, you're helping, even if one person hears this story today, Chester, and it makes a difference for them, that actually empowers, that makes me feel like I that's why I agreed to come on the show today. As much as I love you and I love Adrian, it is really about one person hears this story and it can impact them and change their life and their outlook, then it's worth it. So yeah, just you're not alone. You can take back control of your life. And also by sharing your story, you're going to empower other people and help change their lives.
Oh, Chris, that was beautiful. I've been moved by our conversation today. This has just been so amazing. And, I don't think, I'm trying to recall if we've ever had an ice hockey playing break dancer from the UK on the show. It may be a first. I have to look back to the...
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I know. Yeah. And also just for the impact it can have on your own family as well, right? Like, as a part of that last part, sorry to jump in, but like, even I had a situation with my own family recently where my nephew, I don't want to go too graphic, but he was close to taking his own life, and he's a 10-year-old kid, right? This is like 2 weeks ago. And he was suffering in silence, as a kid, and he tried to, that way too graphic, tried to cut his wrists basically, which is horrific. And I got that message from my sister, and I spent some time with him the next day. We met up, and again, this me sharing, even though he's 10-year-old, me sharing my anxiety. He was like, "Oh, like Uncle Chris, I never thought you would be like that. Like, I see you as successful, and like, I'd never have thought that you would be feeling the way I am." And again, he felt like, as a 10-year-old, like he's this weird kid that he feels this way. And he was all alone, to the point where, like, I can only imagine as a kid to get to that stage where you feel like you don't want to live here. And he wrote a letter to my sister. I'm going to start crying on the podcast now about how he didn't want to be alive. Right. And if he would have known that Uncle Chris was feeling this way in advance, he probably wouldn't have felt so alone. And that I was devastated. Even now, I feel like, right, I'm going to cry just talking about it. But like, it was heartbreaking to know that there's kids, even the kids that are suffering during this time as well, and they feel alone. So it's like, I feel like it's our duty to share our story and be there. And it wasn't. And now he's, I've enrolled him in martial arts. He's started jiu-jitsu. He's super excited about it. He can, he knows he can give me a call whenever he's feeling down, which he has done over the past week or so, just when he's not feeling well, and he has an outreach. He has an outlet. He's not just suffering in silence. So that's just something that, like, even though I shared it on the podcast, like, I wish I spoke more with my family about, because he would have heard about that, and then we can have a chat. We could have had a chat. We wouldn't have got to that stage. And that really hit me, to feel like, oh, like, this is happening in my own family and no one knows about it. Yeah. So sorry to end it on a bit of a downer, but that was really hard to hear.
You know what?
That's actually not a...
Sorry, I was going to say what Adrian was going to say is that's not an ending on a downer. That is, that's beautiful. I think we're all crying right now with that story, because you just don't know. You just don't know. People suffer in silence, and I think that's why your work in HR and the stuff you're doing with your podcast and the stories that you share, and the work that we're trying to do with anxiety at work and leading with gratitude, is that you don't know where people are coming from. You don't know what they're struggling with, and so it's so important to be kind, to be grateful. I love what you said about, and just listen and say, you know what, everybody's having a tough day. Everybody is, and to not take that for granted. Even the happiest people, this breakdancing #1 sales guy, hockey player that's happy all the time. We all have tough days. And most times we're afraid to share those tough days. So, just thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing your story and doing the work you do. It's going to help a lot of people to know that Chris Rainey can come through that and be the Chris Rainey he is. And we're grateful that you're our friend, Chris. And thanks for sharing your story.
Thanks, Chester. Obviously I'm super big fans of both of yours, and super excited about the impact that this podcast and the book is going to have on people as well. So I feel like we just need to everyone needs to play their part. And really excited to be part of the community that you're building. And as I said, if anyone's listening and they want someone to talk to, I'm happy to chat as well. And
So, Chris, this has been just amazing. Where can people learn more about you?
Sure. hrdleaders.com. You can find out more about us. The podcast is also available. HR Leaders Podcast. Anywhere podcasts are available, we're there. And you also can connect with me on LinkedIn.
So, Adrian, I mean, what an incredible conversation with Chris Rainey. The guy just so vulnerable, so genuine, so honest. And, we always at the end, what were your key takeaways? What were a couple of things that just popped in your head and said, boy, that was just unbelievable. I'll never forget that.
One of the most powerful things from Chris was that, for 12 years, he hid this from his wife, from his colleagues, everyone. And yet, one thing he told me that he said, when you hide that, people think the worst. You may have anxiety. That's probably the best thing they can know, because they're thinking, oh, that he doesn't like me. He's a snob, this, that, or the other. People assume the worst. It's better just to sort of be open with this if we can. Yeah.
He said, I would leave weddings early, or I wouldn't go. And they'd say, well, he doesn't care about our family. And then once he said, I have these anxiety attacks, maybe he said, oh, that happens to me too. And they were so forgiving. My big thing was when he finally confessed, if you can say it's a confession on the podcast, how he felt this enormous weight taken off his shoulders, that he was finally free of this secret that he'd been keeping from everybody was one of my really big takeaways.
Another thing I really loved that he said was, when we asked him about, what about managers? How can they help, or team members? And he said, just listen. You don't need to understand, because in this world, we're trying to understand everybody's issues and stuff. And he says, look, no, you're not going to understand how I feel, but you can listen and you can say, are you okay? And truly mean it. I love that.
Yeah. He said, managers, you're not going to have the solution. Don't worry about that. I'm not looking for advice. I'm just looking for somebody to listen. I thought he was so candid when he said, when I was hiding it, I was lying. I was lying to people. And, which is never a good thing. When he stopped lying, it was much better. People were more forgiving. And that was my other big takeaway is he said, people rallied. As soon as they knew I had this problem, they rallied to my defense, that you are never alone. And I thought, boy, that is so reassuring. If you're out there struggling with anxiety, you think you've got to hide it. You think it's a weakness. And yet when you come and you tell people, the people that love you will rally around you.
Yeah, because some people may be listening to this and going, yeah, but people around me wouldn't do this. They'd make fun of me. And it is hard. Everybody's situation is different. That's one thing with Chris is he gets anxious when people aren't around. Others get anxious when people are around. We're all very different. But I just thought his point about being vulnerable, if people around you aren't going to rally to you, you're probably surrounding yourself with the wrong people. And I just loved his vulnerability and the way that he stepped in to help his nephew, who would not have anybody had Chris not been willing to be vulnerable himself.
Yeah. I love that he did his homework. He did his research. Right. He said, I found these are the things that work for me. You could tell that he'd read stuff about the endorphins and, your brain and how it works. And he did his homework and he said, look, these are the things that work for me. They may not work for you. They work for me. If I get enough sleep, if I eat right and I exercise, the odds of me getting anxious, go way down. Anything else? Because there was so much there. You and I could talk for another hour about our takeaways from Chris, right?
So much good about how he's learned to deal with it himself. Calling someone, breathing, the box breathing, the stepping away, finding a new environment. Sleep, eat, exercise, simple little things that he has found that work, that are very profound. And so hopefully, as you're listening, you're finding things that are working for yourself. We, again, are so thankful for our guest, Chris Rainey from HR Leaders, and for the amazing insights that he shared with us. Right, Chess?
Absolutely. I loved at the end when he said, look, if you're listening to this and you need somebody, here's my email address, Chris@hrleaders.com. And I think that kind of vulnerability, and that's what we're hoping to build in our We Thrive Together community. Show up. We want to remove that stigma of being able to talk about anxiety and stress at work and help each other out. Share best practices, develop a community where it's safe to talk about those things, and we can help you get through your anxiety. That's our passion, and that's our mission, right, Adrian?
And we want to thank our producer, Brent Klein, our booking manager, Christy Lawrence, and all of you for tuning in today. We want to thank you so much for taking a few minutes to think about anxiety. If you'd like to connect with us, go to gosticandelton.com or join our We Thrive Together.global community.
Absolutely. Hope to see you there. And have a great week. Surround yourself with... I want to thank our sponsor, Life Guides. Life Guides is a peer-to-peer community that helps people navigate through their day-to-day stressors by providing a place of empathy, listening, wisdom, and support with a guide who has walked in your shoes, experiencing the same challenges that you are having in your life. Let me try that again. Shoot. This would be so easy. It's written right in front of me. Here we go. I want to thank our sponsor, Life Guides, a peer-to-peer community that helps people navigate through their day-to-day stressors by providing a place of empathy, listening, wisdom, and support with a guide who has walked in your shoes, experiencing the same challenge or life experience as you. Go to lifeguides.com/schedule a demo and add the code HEALTHY2021 to the free text box to receive 2 months of free service. And I also want to thank our other sponsor, Go Happy Hub. Go Happy Hub is the most inclusive and timely way to communicate and engage directly with your frontline employees and candidates with a 95% open rate. With Go Happy Hub, you can send text messages directly from corporate to enable permissions for your frontline leaders to communicate with their team. You can send notes of gratitude, logistical updates, referral opportunities, LTOs, new hire introductions, learning content, celebrations, and more. Easily get the right message to the right people with simple segmentation by location, job type, language, and get feedback from the field in a structured, digestible, and actionable way. That's Go Happy Hub. And for listening to our podcast, if you say Chester sent you or Adrian sent you, you get 2 months of free service. A wonderful offer for our listeners.